The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
My friend Tim Kirkchin says that one of the best things about watching baseball is no matter how many games you see, there's a chance every night that you're going to see something that you've never seen before. And last night, for much of America, and maybe those around the world who were watching, they saw something that almost never happens. 27 times in NFL history, a free kick of a field goal after a fair catch happened, and this one was successful, and it was the first successful one made since 1976. 48 years between successful kicks, and it was accomplished last night by the Los Angeles Chargers, who I think used the momentum of that to go on to defeat the Denver Broncos. We'll get into the details of that. Also, some local history with that. One that I do remember, one that I don't, but I'll give you that coming up as well. Washington was involved in this a couple of times in the 70s, and surprisingly, neither one involved George Allen, though the second one, I guess, tangentially involved George Allen. But we are down to the wire now. It's, about 16 hours to go before we reach the deadline for a shutdown of the government, and that likely means that this RFK bill, which seemed to have so much hope going into this week, could be dead, and could mean that we will not have an opening for the district to make a deal with the Commanders to build a stadium on the RFK site. Last night, House Republicans removed a provision allowing D.C. to redevelop the stadium site from a new spending bill, but then that failed on the House floor, and now it's unclear what will happen going from here. Now, they did get the funding in the bill to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge, but the RFK provision was removed from that. Also, there was another provision there as part of the deal that Maryland wouldn't stand in the way of it, and that they would get the National Air Guard fighter jets from the district. They're at Andrews Air Force Base anyway, which is in Maryland, so I don't know how big of a deal that is. But once this RFK provision was removed, Mayor Muriel Bowser said, "We don't want to start all over." She said if the RFK bill does not pass this year, she would have to try again for the fourth time under a GOP Congress with Trump in the White House. We've done all we're supposed to do. This is the vehicle that has been identified and agreed to by Democrats and Republicans. Yes, this was a bipartisan bill agreed to, and the federal government wouldn't have to pay one penny. That didn't stop Elon Musk from tweeting out misinformation that $3 billion would go from the federal government to build this stadium in D.C. No, that's entirely untrue, but that helped to unravel things. Bowser says she has reached out to the Trump administration to try and correct the false impressions going on here, and we're going to try and talk to everybody that is impacting this decision without naming specific people. You may have heard that the NFL could get involved in this. I believe Roger Goodell did some lobbying a couple of weeks ago after the game here on Thanksgiving weekend. I think he was at Capitol Hill talking to various congressmen. Here's the thing about Trump and the NFL. Trump has it in for the league. You know, he's the one that tried to force the merger between the USFL and the NFL, and that failed miserably. He also has attempted over the years to buy franchises. He was in on the Buffalo Bills, didn't get it. You know how vindictive he is, and maybe this is all part of the picture. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. So the schmoozing that may go on in the next 12 hours or so, I don't know how helpful that's going to be. So we're down to the wire on this, and I think if this fails, we're looking more and more at the possibility that they will rebuild on the same site. They own the land around Northwest Stadium. They would build closer to the Morgan Boulevard Metro. It's not ideal. It's not like RFK, and you still have to sit in terrible Beltway traffic before and after games, but at least there will be some public transportation there, and they would if this moves ahead without the district, and Virginia's not a factor at all after this Ted debacle where he tried to move the Caps and the Wizards to Virginia. They're not a player at all. They're forget about them. So it's Maryland and it's D.C., and D.C. seems to be diminishing at this point. But, things can change. We have until midnight, and there is a possibility that a deal can be struck. That's what they say. Deadlines create deals, and keep your fingers crossed. I think most of us would like to see it built in D.C., but if this fails, it's more and more of a likelihood that it will be built in Maryland. All right. Last night, watching this, and I actually have seen this before, but you have to go back to 1979. Now, that wasn't the last time that this was attempted, but if you're watching at the end of the first half, very skillful timeout called by Jim Harbaugh, the coach of the Chargers, as the Broncos had the ball deep in their own territory. It looked like they were just going to run out the clock and go into the locker room. So it got to fourth down, and rather than let them run out the clock, Harbaugh calls timeout to force them to punt. 8 seconds to go. And so, Denver doesn't have much of a choice. They punt, and the Chargers call for a fair catch, but the receiver was interfered with. So instead of being 61 yards away from the goal line, they were now, close enough so that it would be 50 yards away from the goal line. No, or 40, whatever it was. It was 15 yards closer because of the penalty, unsportsmanlike conduct. So that set up a 57-yard field goal attempt for Cameron Dicker the kicker for the Chargers, which he made. And that seemed to give them momentum because they were still down 21-13, but they had a big second half, and they won the game. Justin Herbert throwing for 284 yards and a couple of touchdowns, including the 19-yard go-ahead score in the fourth quarter, and they win the game 34-27. Harbaugh, who is not a conservative guy, likes to let it all hang out, actually said after the game that this was something that he had been hoping to try for a long time.
It's my favorite rule in football, and just been trying to get one of those like every game.
You've been trying to get one of those?
Yeah. It's the first one we've made. We tried one with the 49ers. I think it was like a 70-yarder or 71. 71, thanks. Mr. Dawson. Probably a little. I wanted it so bad that tried a 71-yarder, but it is my favorite rule, and that was and Cam Dicker stepped up and nailed it, and I thought that was a huge good momentum. Got the momentum back, and going into halftime, and then coming out, and Derwin was great in the locker room at halftime. Derwin, talk to these guys. And he did, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that they're going into the half thinking that they're going to be down 21-10, and then you get the field goal to make it 21-13. Not that that's a huge deal, but given that there were 8 seconds on the clock and it looked like the Broncos were going to easily run out the time, good call on his part. Sets up something he'd wanted to do for a long time. Now, Cameron Dicker's a young guy. He hasn't seen a lot of the NFL. It's only been tried 27 times in NFL history. But he's apparently coached well, because when he was set out to attempt, and this is not a field goal attempt. This is not the usual field goal. You have a free kick. So it was really an odd look. It looked like warm-ups where the holder goes out. There's no blockers needed, right? Because there's no rush. It's a free kick. The holder sets up the ball. Cameron Dicker is able to set up, take as much time as he wants. There's no play clock running down. And he sets up, calmly kicks it through for a 57-yard field goal to end the half. And Dicker said it wasn't like somebody came over to him and said, here's the rule, here's how it works. He knew how the rule worked.
Yeah, I didn't know that, so that was funny. They told me that earlier when I got in here, so that was a pretty cool moment. But, we watched the one. I think Joey Sly might have been the last one to have done it, and so we watched that on film in those Fridays, and so we always talked through it. And so it was cool to be able to go out there I didn't really think it would ever happen. I was always just kind of like, that'd be cool if it did, because usually they're longer kicks. Long kicks are fun, so I was hoping it would happen, so it's really cool opportunity.
Yeah, now, the thing he was not aware of was it was the first successful one made since Ray Wersching did it, ironically, for the Chargers. They were in San Diego, but he did it for the Chargers against the Buffalo Bills November 21st, 1976, 45 yards to end the half. The kick put the Chargers up 27-10, so it wasn't as dramatic as that. But the Mac Percival attempt on this, which was good in 1968, is the last one that actually won the game. That was the game winner. Now, there was the Mark Mosley attempt, and this was really bizarre. November 25th, 1979. A lot of people remember this as a George Allen move because George Allen valued special teams earlier than anybody else. He had the first special teams coach in NFL history when he hired Dick Vermeil when he was with the Rams. And then when he came to Washington, Marv Levy was his first special teams coach. But Allen was gone in 1979. Jack Pardee was the coach. And they're playing the Giants in New York. And this is really crazy because, you know, those swirling winds that they have in the Meadowlands in late November of 79, you know, would you go out and do this? But believe it or not, Pardee sent Mark Mosley out to attempt a 74-yard field goal off of this, a fair catch, which gives you the free kick. Okay, it's a free kick, but it's still 74 yards where, you know, Mosley was good from 45 and in, but 74? Redskins were down 14-6. There was no two-point conversion in those days, so what they wanted to do was to make it 14-9, recover the onside kick, and score a touchdown to win. But, you know, they weren't able to do that. Nowadays, you're down 8. You're trying for the touchdown and tying it with the two-point conversion, but they didn't do that. They lost that game, but they won the next two against Green Bay and Cincinnati to get to 10-5. And then, as we talked about the anniversary of it this week, the 45th anniversary, they went to Dallas and lost the heartbreaker to Roger Staubach and the Cowboys. All right, Commanders, get ready to play on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles. The line seems short. Eagles by 3.5. Eagles may be the best team in the league. The Commanders, while they have 9 wins, they've only beaten one team with a non-losing record, and that's Arizona at 7-7. So, you know, you kind of wonder why it's so short. My feeling is it's hard to keep on winning in the NFL, that sooner or later you're going to lose no matter how good you are. And they won 10 straight, so that could be a factor in this. Still, the Commanders, you know, going into this year, the feeling was win 7-8 games. It's a great year. They won 9 with a chance to win 12 or certainly 11. Nick Allegretti, who's played on Super Bowl teams with the Kansas City Chiefs, where they were generally the favorites, now relishing the role as underdog.
It's a cool mentality to have. Just to believe that the rest of the league, the rest of the fans out there don't believe in you. I kind of love that. It's cool. You get to kind of come together and know that, you know, outside of these walls, no one believes in you, but in these walls, we see the work that we put in. We know the talent that we have. It's a cool mindset, and it's a mindset that you honestly you want to stay in forever, as long as you possibly can. Even years down the road, hopefully, we've had a lot of success, and you still got to find a way to keep that underdog mentality and not be satisfied with any success that you've had prior. It doesn't matter. It matters where you're at then. So I love that mentality.
You know who knows the underdog mentality better than anyone? Terry McLaurin, whose team has been underdogs, and rightfully so, for most of his career here. Now he's got a chance to be on a team that not only has a chance in the playoffs, but a chance to maybe win a round or two. Who knows? This is clearly the best team he's played on. He's played on only one team that didn't have a losing record, and they were 8-1 in his second year. He played on a team that went 7-9 and made the playoffs, but he's seen a lot of losing around here. So to be in this position is a lot of fun for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had faith in the guys that we had in this locker room this year coming in. Just a great mix of guys who have won a lot of games, a great rookie class that came in have really filled some holes for us. And I think the great thing about it is we got to create our own identity this year. There wasn't really a lot of expectations for us, but the work that we put in, we expected a lot from ourselves going into this season, and we knew it was going to be built on the fundamentals of out-hitting people, protecting the football, taking the football away, and I think the messaging that DQ has given us from the start of the season has been great, and you've seen the maturation process of this team. I just think if we want to take the next step and be, real contenders, you got to be able to compete with the best, and, you got to give them credit. They've been at the top of the division for the last few years, so, we're up for the challenge, you know what I mean? Like, last game doesn't dictate what's going to happen this weekend. We're excited to compete at a high level, and like I said, I think we're an improved team from last time we played them, but it's going to come down to making those plays when we got to make them to change the course of the game.
And for you personally, you've been through a lot of lean years here, and you're playing meaningful December football.
Yeah.
How refreshing is that for you personally?
Man, I remember coming off the bye week last week, and Coach Ingram came into the receiver room, and he was like, it feels good to come off a bye week and know the ending part of your season means something. I kind of sat there in my seat, and I was like, damn right it does, because, unfortunately the last few years, at this point in the season, it's a grind because you're not playing for it all, and so that gives you an extra boost of motivation, and especially with us again coming off the bye week, having a win out of New Orleans, and then coming into this big game, makes it exciting that we have everything we want in front of us, and we got the guys in this building that we feel like can help us get there.
Good for Terry McLaurin. Nobody deserves this success more than he does. All that he went through here, the 12 or 13 quarterbacks that he played with before he got to Jaden Daniels. And to be in this position, I think he should be congratulated as much as anybody. Not the longest in terms of tenure. I mean, that's Tress Way, the punter. Jonathan Allen's been here longer, but someone who's really been a stand-up guy through all this, Terry McLaurin. Really, really impressive. And we'll talk more about the game coming up in the next hour. Also do Ravens preview as we do every Friday. Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report will join us. Ravens with a 4:30 kickoff tomorrow, a Saturday afternoon game, which you'll hear right here on ESPN 630, starting with pregame at 4 o'clock. Coming up, the coach who I think will win Coach of the Year, despite all the success that Dan Quinn has had here. But he's a former assistant in Washington, and he's getting it done in Minnesota. That's Kevin O'Connell. We'll hear from him as he was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and much more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We're keeping our fingers crossed on this RFK Stadium bill, which is not included in the latest proposal. There is funding for the rebuilding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, but with the new proposal that has not been approved, but it is now, up for vote again. They'll try and, work their way through it today, but the RFK bill is not a part of it, which would seem to kill it, at least for this year, and who knows for the long term. But watch on that. Just a couple more notes on this bizarre thing that happened last night in the Chargers' win over the Broncos, where the Chargers got a free kick at the end of the first half, thanks to a fair catch and an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty tacked on, and Cameron Dicker was able to make a 57-yard field goal with no rush. I mean, it was just like a warm-up attempt in the pregame, and he kicked it through from 57, and instead of being down 27-10 or 21-10, they were down 21-13 going into the half, and they rallied to beat the Broncos 34-27. This has happened 27 times in NFL history. Last time it was successful was 1976, where Ray Wersching did it for the same franchise when they were in San Diego against Buffalo, November 21st of 1976. But Washington had it happen twice, and a lot of people like me remembered it as being a George Allen call, because George Allen was somebody who embraced special teams. They were very important to him. But it actually happened on either side of his run. 1970, this was the year after Vince Lombardi died, so Bill Austin was the interim coach, and Kurt Knight kicked one, or attempted one, against Denver, which was wide left from 49 yards out at the end of the half. Didn't matter in the final score. Washington still won 19-3. But the last time they tried it was after Allen left. It was 1979 against the Giants. Mark Mosley, I guess with the go-ahead from Jack Pardee, attempted one from 74 yards out, which, of course, was missed. They lost the game 14-6. But I've been told, and I don't remember this specifically, but I've been told that George Allen, who who had been fired by the Rams the year before, was doing the color on CBS, probably with Vince Scully, when that game occurred in 1979. Wow. All right, Chris Collinsworth on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, weighing in on the quarterback change in Atlanta. Likely means we'll see Michael Penix Jr. here when the Falcons come to town a week from Sunday instead of seeing Kirk Cousins. And Collinsworth said this about Penix, which leads you to believe that he could become the guy and one of those franchise guys for Atlanta, but they hoped that they weren't going to be able to unwrap him until next year.
We did an Atlanta game early on against Kansas City, I think it was. And even then, Dan, they were talking about, oh my goodness, we've got one here. And I'm sure they haven't come out and publicly, done that. But they were really excited about what they were seeing, and they really did not want to play him. They really wanted it to, be the whole Jordan Love, just let him sit and let him watch and let him learn. And because there's a whole cadence to being the quarterback. You have to go through, the press deal on Wednesday or whenever that thing is, survive that. You have to do it after the game. You've got a million different obligations. It's almost like being the head coach of the team. And it's hard. And so then you have to budget your time. And generally quarterbacks are going in on their off day on Tuesday and learning the game plan. And, it's just, there's a lot that goes into it. And seeing the live defenses and what they're going to do. And then what they're going to do to him will be completely different than what they've done to other guys. So I think they were really hoping they were going to make it through the year, but once they got to this point and it looked like the season was breaking a little bit and they had to have it now, I think they're putting him in to win. I don't think this is anything like, hey, let's take a look. I think at this point they really feel like he's the best option to win.
The situation with Minnesota, that would be a good quarterback dilemma, I would think. The way Barkley's playing, J.J. McCarthy, got a chance to sit this year, maybe sits next year. What do you do with Sam Darnold if you were running the Vikings for the future?
They really like J.J. up there. I mean, really like him. The plan, my opinion of what the plan was that they were going to let Sam Darnold walk at the end of this thing. At least that's what it was early in the year. But not many teams go on a run like this, right? I mean, this is pretty special. And they have a chance with the way they play defense and the way that Brian Flores is so good at just bringing that constant pressure and disrupting and making big plays and all the things that they do. And then Sam Darnold has this, JJ is just unbelievable. And Addison has, proven what he can do. And this is a team with a chance to win it. I don't think there's a team currently that I would just go, oh, nobody's beating them, right? I just don't think there is right now. We've seen, the Chiefs struggled. Detroit's got some injuries. Buffalo's had their moments. But Josh Allen's hot and all those sorts of things. But could the Minnesota Vikings win it all? Yes. And that was always my question. That's the whole thing. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Everybody's got a plan until you win a Super Bowl or you make it to the Super Bowl or you make it to the championship game. And I was trying to determine what was the cutoff at which Sam Darnold would have to be your quarterback, right? I mean, there's no going back. If you win a Super Bowl, Sam Darnold has to come back and be the quarterback, doesn't he? But the belief in what they saw out of the draft process with J.J. McCarthy was so strong. Even if they made it to the championship game, I'm just not sure that they don't switch to J.J.
Well, I mean, think about that. That's a nice problem to have. But there's a lot between now and then. They got 3 more regular season games for Minnesota, and then, as many as 4 postseason games. Probably going to be a wild card, but I guess they could win the division, have the first-round bye with the best record in the NFC, though Philadelphia could be closing in on that. But anyway, Kevin O'Connell, who was here as the quarterback's coach, was actually Kirk Cousins' quarterback coach, now in Minnesota, now with Sam Darnold, who said going into the season, I know we took J.J. McCarthy 10th overall, and I know some people had him going as high as 2, but he's going to sit for a while. We have our quarterback. His name is Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold has created this kind of bizarre dilemma for them. So when O'Connell came on the Patrick Show, Dan asked him about how much coaching he actually does with him.
I try to not, be so heavily involved because I think Josh McCown and Grant Udinsky in that room, we've got a really good kind of support system directly for him in that room. What I try to really be is, really 3 things: is the play caller, giving him as much play intent of what I'm thinking so I can eliminate any gray. I think one of the big things I've always thought a quarterback needs to know is that I'm not going to be standing or sitting in the room on Monday morning holding the clicker and say, hey, why didn't you do this? Hey, this guy's open. Why didn't you throw that? Like, what I try to say is give clear, concise, hey, this is what we're trying to get done. If that doesn't happen, if I give you a bad play, like, here's what I want you to do with it. Here's where, your outlet or your check downs are going to be, and let's live to fight another down. Let's not try to, you don't need to be Superman for us here. Although I do think he's made some Superman-esque throws this year with the talent he has and his ability to throw it. And that's what I'm, most trying to do on a one-on-one level. And then there's the element of how we're going to manage the game together, because I do think the benefit of being the play caller and the head coach is a lot of times, I can kind of help the management overall of when we're going to be ultra aggressive, when we're going to be, kind of in a mode of, hey, our defense is playing great. I'm going to give you this play call, but let's make sure we ensure 3 points, or let's make sure that no matter what, we end this possession end this down with possession of the football, because if the way our defense is playing, if we don't do things to lose the game right now, we got a great chance to win it. And there's just a lot of times in the game where that can get away from you if you don't have that direct line of communication with the quarterback. So I know those are probably the 2 things. And then just, overall, just how we put it all together, just making sure that he's an extension of me out there. And I feel really good about it. Sam's done a phenomenal job, Dan. He really has.
Yeah, the team is 12-2. I mean, this is a guy that got off the scrap heap after he'd been through the New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers, maybe the 2 most dysfunctional organizations, not just in the NFL, but in sports. We'll get to the Jets mess coming up shortly, but more from Kevin O'Connell. And this was a question about how he has approached this season and how he continues to approach it. And was there at any point a, hey, nobody believes in us speech?
To me, at the beginning of the year, Dan, it was easy to say, to give that speech, because that would have been accurate at the time. But I did have a feeling about this team, even going back into the offseason, new additions arrive, and you're kind of just seeing the team come together. And it seemed like every few days, I remember vividly a conversation I had with Harrison Smith, second or third day of training camp. And I just kind of walked up to him and we were talking and kind of assessing, it was during special teams. And I said, Harry, I think we'd be pretty good. And he's like, I think so too. And we kind of just kept on having good days. And my whole focus was just, it really wasn't about, motivating from a standpoint of, hey, nobody's talking about us or the win projections or anything like that. I didn't get into all that. It was just trying to get these guys to truly see if we can maximize every day. And it can be a cliche if you're, if you're not authentically believing it, that's the most important thing for this team this year. But I truly did feel between our, having a new quarterback and just, so many new faces on the defense and Flo kind of bringing that group together every single day. We had to maximize the time we had. And if we didn't, I didn't necessarily think we would reach our potential or, as early as we needed to have the kind of impact to get the confidence going, to start really believing. And we were able to rip off 5 in a row to start the season. And we, I tell our team this sometimes because I want them to remember it, especially the totality of our roster. But we won all 3 preseason games, Dan. I'd never won a preseason game before. So that was, I was hoping that wouldn't be the marquee moment of the year for us. But outside of losing 2 games in 5 days, by 2 to Detroit and then going playing Sean and the Rams on the road on a short week, this team hasn't lost outside in the other 15 total opportunities. So proud of what we are, but means absolutely nothing. Got a heck of a challenge this week going to Seattle. Mike McDonald's got that's a tough watch on tape for an opposing team because he's doing some really good things on offense, defense, and special teams.
Kevin O'Connell, who I think is going to win the Coach of the Year. Does that matter to you?
I'm lucky I don't have a vote because there's a lot of really good coaches in our league, man.
Okay, who would you vote for Coach of the Year? If you can vote for yourself.
I can't envision a scenario like that. But if I can't vote for myself, I would probably say, I think Dan Campbell in our division, coaching against him, that team is always really well prepared, tough. They've truly taken on the persona of their head coach, which I think is, what means the most in this position, having done it now for 3 years. I think Mike Tomlin would be, there's nobody I respect more than Mike Tomlin and what he has consistently done his whole career. And I just love anytime I get a chance to be around him, I always take something from it. And just love him. But I would say probably one of those 2 guys. Can't sleep on Dan Quinn either. I know that's been a heck of a year for them as well.
Yeah, it has, no question. And Dan Quinn will get consideration, but Kevin O'Connell is the Coach of the Year. Rookie quarterback. That's a great thing with Jaden Daniels, no question. Roster completely overhauled, an organization that was a toxic mess when he took over, all those things. But Sam Darnold, people would have laughed at the beginning of the season if you would have said with 3 games to go, the Minnesota Vikings have a chance to lock up the number 1 seed in the NFC. I mean, a legitimate chance. I think the Eagles are probably going to wind up doing it. And they are now tied with the Detroit Lions, and the Lions have enough offense to keep you in a game, but their defense is so beat up now. They've lost too many players that I don't think it's realistic that down the stretch of the last 3 that they can win all 3 and have the number 1 seed. So I'm looking at Minnesota as a legit threat to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. They're 3-point favorites on the road at Seattle this week. It looks like Geno Smith is going to be ready to play. He left the game with a knee injury. And by the way, Sam Howell came in. If you didn't see this last week, horrible, just awful when he came in. But doesn't look like Howell's going to start. Geno's going to be ready to go. But even so, Minnesota 3-point favorite at maybe the toughest place to play in the NFL at Seattle. So great job by Kevin O'Connell this year, and to be doing it with Sam Howell, not Sam Howell, but Sam Darnold. If he did it with Sam Howell, it'd be even more amazing. To be doing it with Sam Darnold, the way he has done it, is absolutely remarkable. All right, coming up next hour, we do the Ravens Report every Friday. Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report will join us at 10:30. Also, Paul Feinbaum with a little playoff preview as we get started tonight. Snowing in South Bend. So if you like to see snow and football, and hopefully my son has prepared, he's going to be there in the stands, and hopefully he's got warm clothes, Jewish dad looking out for the kid. But that'll be tonight, and Feinbaum will have that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. It's kind of like the Sharks versus the Jets. Who's going to win the battle of the television set? College football up against Lord football, the NFL. And it's not like the NFL looked at Saturday and said, we're going to eat that too. They've been there. NFL's been on Saturday this time of year since I was a kid, since they had a 14-game schedule. This has been common for the NFL to play games on Saturday. But something new, college football, which didn't have a playoff with 12 teams until this year, has now gone head-to-head with the NFL, or at least we'll give it a go tomorrow, and we're going to see how that's going to work out. We've got Tony and Mike on that yesterday on PTI, which I will get to. 10:30, Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report, as the Ravens will be one of those teams from the NFL going up against college football, as they've got two great games. I mean, these are good teams, and the NFL did this so that they can play these games. They put these teams specifically on this day tomorrow so they can recycle them on Christmas Day. All good teams, all teams that should be in the playoffs. Kansas City Chiefs, two-time defending champions at home against the Houston Texans, the full Taylor Swift effect, we think, unless she's got a concert or something. And that'll be the early game. And then the late game is good as it gets in the AFC, Steelers and Ravens. This is an enormous rivalry, an enormous game for the Ravens, big for the Steelers as well. But that'll be right up against the college football playoff. And we're going to see what the numbers are going to do on that. But Tony Lombardi will have a look at this game. And something else I want to ask him about, and that is, what about the future of John Harbaugh? You know, he's done a great job there. He's won a Super Bowl. They're in the playoffs every year. But the organization is very good. And if you got the best car, you want the best driver. And not that he's not a great driver, but how long is the prime Lamar Jackson window open? I know he's young. He's 27, maybe 28. He's probably got 6, 7, really good years left. But these are the best years. These are the years that he should be in the Super Bowl if he's going to get there. And, if they come up short this year, you got to wonder about that. Coaches don't last forever. It's the only coach that Steve Bisciotti has ever hired. But, things change. And you are only as good as your last game. And if this team comes up short this year, is that something they would consider? So we will get to that. As for the way things line up tomorrow, and this is really incredible. And we're going to have a couple of the games. We're going to have actually 3 games with the pro game. So it's like football all afternoon here on ESPN 630. But starting at 11 o'clock tomorrow, we will have the game between Penn State and SMU. Now, maybe this will help the NFL a little bit, as if they need help. But these games, a couple of these games are going to be on TNT. Maybe people won't know. Some won't know where to find it, because that's not, generally where you find college football games. But they will have the game between SMU and Penn State at noon. And then the 4 o'clock game is Clemson at Texas. That's also on TNT. But meantime, Lord Football, the NFL, moves in, and they've got their games. They've got the early game between Houston and Kansas City, which kicks off at 1 o'clock. That's on NBC. And then at 4:30, Baltimore hosts Pittsburgh, and that's on Fox. So you got all this football going on between 1 and, let's say, 7:30, 8 o'clock, which is when college football will have the TV to themselves again, when Tennessee plays at Ohio State, and we'll also have that game for you here on ESPN 630. What are you going to watch? What is America going to see? On one hand, you could say, well, this is the setup that could decide the national championship. This is not the playoffs for the NFL. This is the playoffs for college football. On the other hand, you got some real compelling stuff. So I am an older person. I will use the remote to switch back and forth. I know some people have multiple television sets where they watch TV, and it's not a problem at all. But Isaac Harris is in the studio. He's a young guy in his 20s. I would ask you this. What are you going to watch, and how are you going to consume this?
I'm going to watch the playoff, Andy.
Yeah.
The playoff is just so fascinating to me because it's never happened like this before, especially at the FBS level. So I'm definitely watching the playoff.
I understand that. And you're not that far removed from college. And I'm probably going to spend more time on the college myself, since I don't have any particular allegiance to any of the 4 teams that are playing in the NFL. But, if the Commanders were playing, I'd watch that. But I think the NFL is going to win, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because I think the NFL is king when it comes to, like, the cream of the crop when it comes to football.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the NFL. Everyone has their regional ties to it. But college, it's a time period in people's lives, and I think it's temporary.
I think what's going to be interesting is how the numbers break down. Because if college football just gets clobbered in this, they're going to have to sit down with the league and say, okay, what do you guys want, and we'll work around you. But anyway, this was yesterday. These are two old guys. One is older than I am. One's my age. Tony and Mike looking at this circumstance that we're going to have on TV tomorrow.
The Texans and Chiefs will kick off 1 hour into SMU's game against Penn State. And the Steelers and Ravens will take the field at 4:30 Eastern, just a half an hour after the start of Clemson, Texas. Now I'm going to be at DePaul Northwestern basketball, Tony, in that window. So I know you'll be watching. I'll be calling you, blowing up your phone to get scores.
Yep.
So the college playoff games going up against the NFL games. Big deal, little deal, no deal at all.
Big deal. Actually, a really big deal. Nobody ever beats the NFL. Golf gets out of the golf business when the NFL season starts. They just stop in September. Excuse me. The NFL drills baseball. Baseball rearranges their playoff schedule to not go head-to-head with the NFL. The NFL annihilates the NBA. The NBA was doing fine on Christmas Day for a few years. Somebody in the NFL office has said, let's crush them like ants, which they did. Now nobody even knows who's playing in the NBA on Christmas Day. But football on football crime, Mike, this is pretty new. There are spots in this country, as you well know, having covered college football, where college football will outrate the NFL. I would think that an Alabama-Georgia game would outrate a Falcons-Saints game, for example, especially this year, because those teams aren't very good. I certainly think that's possible. The point I want to make here, though, is the NFL isn't going after college football. The NFL has had this Saturday window for years.
Decades.
After Army-Navy. After Army-Navy, you get to play. This is college football attempting to spit in the eye of the NFL. This is a different thing.
Yeah, I understand why college football did it, although they could have put all 4 games on Friday. They could have essentially declared Friday college football playoff holiday. And they could have gone 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11:30, whatever. They could have done that, and Friday, tomorrow, nobody's working tomorrow. And it's just not, certainly not in the second half of the day. They could have done that. They decided to go with the traditional Saturday, which, as you mentioned accurately, the NFL's been there for decades. In college, I remember watching these games on Saturday in the last couple of weeks of the regular season, back when they had 14 games they did this. So I think it's a big deal for another reason. You can watch all the games. I know you are the last person in America who refuses to have a second screen. Most of us,
don't have multiple
because
TVs.
even if you have an 80-inch screen, you can have your laptop, you have a handheld. Everybody watches more than one screen. Go to your local bar. You can watch everything. This is a bonanza. This is a big deal for that reason.
I got one set, but I'm going to start with the college games. But, Mike, I want to see how Patrick Mahomes does on a bad ankle, and I want to see Lamar Jackson against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I do too. And I love Wilbon, but Wilbon has multiple residences. He also is a father of a teenage son who I'm sure encourages him to have the multiple TVs and the streaming and all that. Not that Wilbon wouldn't do it himself, but for Mike to say that Tony's the last person in America to have one TV, it's not even economics. It's concentration. I'm 66 years old. I can't watch 4 things at once. I have one TV, love it, 65 inches of gorgeous HD. I have a remote control in my hand, which I can switch back and forth, commercials, dead time, whatever. But the reality is not everybody has multiple TVs, Mike. It's just not something that everybody is onto. Yes, you can watch on your laptop. You can watch on your phone. Technology has changed. And also, again, Mike, you know, I love you, but you work a schedule that's a little bit different than most people, and this is not a day off for everybody. Yes, traffic was light coming in, but it's Friday, it's a work day, and when you're spending the kind of money that you're spending, the networks, they don't want to put these games on TV on a Friday. They don't. I mean, this is good for like minor bowl games, things like that, maybe some college basketball on a Friday afternoon. But if you're going to put your high-priced items out on a day where your audience just isn't big enough to really justify it, you're not going to do it. So now you're fighting for turf. And that's going to be the most interesting thing to see is how the ratings break down. And if this is a landslide for the NFL, college football has to rethink it. There's only so many eyeballs. There's only so many hours to do this. And you can stagger these games as much as you want. Heck, if I had a say in this, they'd be starting these games at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's how my body clock works. And I don't care if I lived on the West Coast. I'd get up and watch it. I told my son who lives in Seattle, I'm jealous of the time slot he lives in, or the way that he can watch a game and they're going to have this next year, if not next year, the year after, where they're going to have a game overseas every week. So games on the West Coast that start at 6:30 in the morning for the NFL, bring it on. That's fine. Games that start at 9 o'clock at night, not so good. Not so good for me. As for what we're going to see and how this is all going to shake out once we get to tomorrow night, Paul Feinbaum, who covers college football and does a show on ESPN, was on our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday talking about the 4 games that we'll see this weekend, plus the state of college football as it is right now.
We're at absolutely one of the weirdest moments in time. We're about to see tomorrow night the first college football playoff, which is something the sport has desperately needed. But on the other side of it, the model is breaking apart. It has been shattered. There is so much wrong in the sport. So I've never quite seen a moment where there is so much enthusiasm and excitement, but also so much fear on the other side of whether this is going to be like the Big Bang.
Paul, just looking at it from your perspective, knowing what they tried to make the playoff versus what we got, how would you evaluate the job that the selection committee did in terms of establishing the playoff field?
I think they did okay. We can quibble about the final spot. Should it have gone to SMU or Alabama? But I'm not overly concerned about something like that. We're not talking about the creme de la creme. We're talking about the last team that should be in. The biggest flaw, and it's been said many times, it will be said many times in the next couple of weeks, is the seating is absurd. There's no reason why Boise State and Arizona State should get buys, while Ohio State and Penn State and schools like Tennessee and Texas are having to play a first-round game. But that was necessary to make it work. Remember, the system was approved, and then a couple of commissioners tried to blow it up, and the only way to get it back was to agree to some of these absurd things.
Paul, I want to go back to what you said about the model being shattered in college football and a lot being wrong with the sport. As someone who's so ingrained in college football, what do you think the biggest issue facing the sport is right now?
Well, the biggest issue is the fact that there's simply no management of the system. What I mean by that is that you can almost do anything. We're talking about SMU being in the playoffs on Saturday morning at Penn State. This is a program in the late 80s was shut down for doing really what's now not so much legal but being looked the other way. And the real issue now is, too, that the rich are only getting richer. That's a cliche, but it's really true. Most programs can't afford it. The athletic director of the University of Alabama had to literally come out yesterday in a tweet and a letter, not to his top boosters, but to the masses, begging for money, essentially saying, we lost a couple of players in the portal. We can't let that happen again. And it's like the AD was reading message boards and reading social media and reacting to it, but that's exactly what he was doing. And I had a caller yesterday on our show who said, listen, I know you talked about how this was a wrong idea, but I just donated $100. And this guy, for him, that was a lot of money.
Right.
But that $100 is not going to get anywhere. What programs like Alabama and Georgia and Texas need, they need millions of dollars. We read the story 2-3 weeks ago where the head of Oracle, because he's dating a Michigan graduate, ended up buying the top quarterback in the class of 25 away from LSU. I hate to keep using the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, but I could not have made this up 5 years ago or 10 years ago because no one would have believed it.
Paul, you bring up such an interesting point. I hadn't thought about it this way with SMU. Like, the reason they got the death penalty is the same reason a program would have life right now, right?
No
like
doubt.
what they did to die is what actually revives programs now across the country. We're talking with Paul Feinbaum, of course, Paul Feinbaum Show, SEC Network, 3 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Let's go to specifics. Game on Saturday, Ohio State, Tennessee. Is there a chance that Ryan Day is coaching his last game at Ohio State on Saturday?
I think so, and I know everyone wants to read and sing from the same hymnal that where he's not going to be fired. It will cost $37 million. And I would simply respond to you, just watch the game in the fourth quarter if Tennessee is ahead by a touchdown and see how that crowd reacts. It might be a situation where it's so untenable that the school literally goes, Ryan, what do you want to get out of here? Because it's simply not possible. I mean, I know people think, well, look at his record, look at his accomplishments. He's in the playoffs, but it's that bad, and there's nothing really comparable to it. It really, I don't think in sports where you could be as successful as he has been and be as unpopular, because in the state of Ohio, winning the Ohio State-Michigan game is really more important than anything else. And this guy now has lost 4 straight. One thing to lose to Jim Harbaugh last year with the best team in the country or even the year before, but to lose to Sharon Moore, a team that got just chewed up and spit out by so many programs this year, and to lose that game 13-10 at home was such a dismal offensive performance. And on top of the fact that he's got the highest paid roster in college football, more than $20 million. I mean, Ohio State went to Alabama and bought the center who won the Remington for the top center this year, and Caleb Downs, who was Alabama's best defensive player last year on a national semifinal team, and he still couldn't do any better than he's done in the past.
Paul, similar question for James Franklin. How much pressure is he and Penn State under to win in the first round against SMU in Happy Valley this weekend?
It's a similar situation, although it's different, that Penn State fans have become accustomed to being a 10-2 team. And by the way, that is a good record, but their standards aren't as insufferable as Ohio State. They did win a Rose Bowl 2 years ago, and they've won a couple of big games. And most of his losses are against Ohio State and Michigan. So, I mean, it would be an embarrassing loss. And I think we'll find out what this first round means. I think the only direct line I could draw would be in the NCAA basketball tournament when, let's say, a Kentucky got knocked out twice in the last 3 years, and suddenly the head coach says, you know what, I think I'd rather live in Arkansas.
That's Paul Feinbaum, who is, I think, as clued in on college football as anybody. And, I've talked about the attrition that's happening in the NFL, and we're going to have a Super Bowl where it's going to be 2 backup quarterbacks. We've already had a couple of them where backup quarterbacks have started and won, okay, so you could argue that way. But it's a long season, and the college football season, if any of the 8 teams that are playing this weekend make it to the championship game, that's an extra 4 games on top of 12. That's 16 games. That's what the NFL was till just a few years ago. And you're starting to see the attrition. Georgia looks like it's going to have to go the distance without their starting quarterback. Carson Beck appears to be out for the year. Now, I don't know if it's the same type of elbow injury that Brock Purdy had, but the word is he's gone and won't be available the rest of the way. Now, when you're a program like Georgia, you can stock quarterbacks, and they've got Gunnar Stockton, who's been there for a couple of years and came in and was able to close out the championship game over Texas in the SEC. But he's inexperienced, relatively speaking. He's thrown for 354 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Good numbers. 72% of his passes have been completed, but a lot of it's been in garbage time, except for that game last week. So, they're going to go with a backup quarterback. And Carson Beck has been one of the top quarterbacks in college football this year. 13 games, 3,400 yards, 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Looks like he's headed to the draft unless, there's some questions about his elbow and, whether he needs to prove it again. And if he does, and that's the other thing, when you have these quarterbacks in the pipeline ready to go, is Georgia going to say to him, well, I know you want to come back, but we're ready to go with Gunnar Stockton, who's been a backup here for 2 years. And same thing at Texas with Arch Manning, who's ready to go. And, the question is, how are those things going to all shake out? But, the attrition level that we're seeing in the NFL is going to start in college. And we're at the point now where the way the college game is played that you don't, wring your hands and say, oh, those poor student athletes who, have to scrape together some meal money on the weekends to try and get a pizza. It's not that way anymore. They're paid professional athletes. So, that's part of the deal. But 16 college games, not only, and then we're going to start to see, well, we already are, but it's going to be more and more prevalent, even guys that don't go to the NFL who play these kind of college seasons. What's it going to mean for CTE and so forth for them down the line? Something to be concerned about. I saw this yesterday. It really surprised me. And there's a yes, I still get the paper. There's a full-page picture of this in the Post today. What the Capital One Arena is going to look like after this renovation project that's going to take place. And there was a big rollout last night before the Wizards played and won a game, number 4 this year. Really bad team that came in, but they beat Charlotte last night. Before the game, Adam Silver was in town, Mayor Muriel Bowser was down there, and Ted Leonsis, and they did this big ceremony where they took a sledgehammer to a picture of the old arena. And the artist rendering of the new one looks like something that's totally different. It looks like one of those modern NFL stadiums, kind of like SoFi Stadium. It's got this big dome over it. And it looks like maybe only the entrance that you have now, if you see it now on F Street, that's going to remain. So that's going to be a huge project, and they're going to do all these renovations while the place is still open. Now, the Mystics aren't going to be able to play there, I think, for a couple of years, which brings up an interesting problem when Caitlin Clark comes to town. I guess they could play like at Maryland or maybe even like George Mason. I'm not sure, but they're not going to be playing in Southeast because that only holds like 4,000 people. But I'm really curious about this to see what this is going to look like when they finish. But the district is coughing up the money to make it happen, and this is all part of the big plan to revitalize that area. There's been a lot of crime down there, and they're going to work on cleaning that up and so forth. But that's what it's going to look like. It's really, really interesting. So if you haven't seen it, you can sure find it online, and if you're an old person like me and still pay $3 a day. I don't pay that, but that's the newsstand price, if there are such thing as newsstands for the Post. And then this, I often do anniversaries of movies. Today is the 44th anniversary of one of the great films made of all time, never mind sports films. It's Raging Bull, where Robert De Niro gave the performance of a lifetime. De Niro has done many, many great pictures, including Godfather 2 and many. He's done some ones, Taxi Driver, got a claim. And he's done some really crappy ones too, let's face it. But this was the highlight of his career. It was came out in 1980 on this day. And if you haven't seen it, it's in black and white. It's a Martin Scorsese film. Joe Pesci's in it. They were both great. Didn't win Picture of the Year. Ordinary People won, which is also an unbelievable movie with Mary Tyler Moore. But it was named the movie of the 80s. And in the movie, or in making of the movie, De Niro gains 60 pounds to play Jake LaMotta late in life. And then, as I'm told, he lost the weight, became cut, like, washboard abs, to become Jake LaMotta in his prime. And it's an unbelievable performance. And Al Pacino wrote Robert De Niro a letter after seeing the movie. He said, "Hey, Bobby, just got to tell you, I saw your Raging Bull for the first time Saturday. I'm still high from it. It's a monumental piece of art, an inspiration to me. I never do this, as you know, simply because if I start doing it now, I have to write a note to everybody. That's not true, of course, but I just had to do this. Sorry if I've embarrassed you. Out of this world, Bobby. Love, Al." So that's Game recognizing Game. And that movie, if you haven't seen it, is unbelievable. It's an experience. I wouldn't even call it entertainment because it was so intense. But Joe Pesci was fantastic, and De Niro was incredible. And when they named the movies of the 80s, the movie that came out on this day in 1980 was named Movie of the Decade. All right, coming up, we got Ravens preview. Tony Lombardi, the Russell Street Report, will join us. Also, preview from Chris Sims and Mike Florio and what Jeff Saturday says about what this game means to Lamar Jackson. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.